G'day, Flosstube. It is February 25th. My name's Anna, aka Moranalis. Back again with another stitchy update. Welcome to anybody who is new. Thanks for coming back, anybody who's been hanging with me before. Yeah, I hope you enjoy yourselves, get a cup of tea, etc. Whatever your favorite way to watch Flosstube is. And yeah, I got a few things I'm pretty excited to show you. So, first one is, when we were back in the States, I went through a lot of my mom's stuff. You know, all her flosses just sort of went into my stash. She hasn't stitched in about 10 years, mostly due to her eyesight and stuff. So, that's a bit of a bummer, but good for me. I got a whole bunch more stash. Anyway, things like she used to stitch with a frame. I don't use a frame, so I rehomed it. But in amongst the pile, there was, excuse me, a bit of cough. There was a few pieces that she finished that she had never done anything with. And so they wound up in the suitcase and back here in Australia. This one I have finished up. Ooh, let me see if I can get the other pile. Didn't realize I was showing. Out of the way. So this one, I have done, I guess, my interpretation of Priscilla and Chelsea, all their fancy finishes with the extra decorations and whatnot. And I'm pretty stinking pleased with how it turned out, to be honest. All this board is just cheap plywood. Snaffled it out of the shed where my husband had some offcuts. They just happened to be about that wide, and I thought, perfect. Cut them into, you know, basically measured this, added a few inches for border, cut them into even lengths, and then wonkied them up a bit, because with this one I didn't want everything perfectly straight and even. A bit of base coat of paint, a bit of dry brushing to get some texture, and I don't know how well it's showing that gold on there. That's Inca gold around the edges and whatnot, just to give it some definition. So, and then as per Chelsea and whatnot's usual, there's magnets on the back of there and washers on the back of there so that you can take it apart, put it back together if you need to. I don't really intend to swap out the picture in this one, but I wanted to be able to take it apart so that, you know, the stitching could be cleaned if needed and all that sort of thing. So that way there's no permanent fixture with the stitching or glue or anything holding it. All the decorations are just on the plywood boards. But because it's just cheap, cruddy plywood, it's really actually quite light. I think it'll hang quite well. Certainly lighter than some big heavy framed pieces. The ivy, because a lot of my mixed media stuff tends to be very small, because I did a lot of cards, it was kind of out of proportion for this project. So I just went to the fake flower section at my big box store and got some ivy, some, I don't even know what those are, little puffy beads. The ribbon was from my stash. In fact, I think if you look at the wrong side of it, it says like 2000. It was probably to celebrate, you know, year 2000, kids graduating or something like that. So it's old, but you turn it upside down and you can't tell, and it's got the gold around the edge to match. These flowers did come out of my stash. As per all the flowers I have, they start out white and then I color them whatever color I want. Let's see if I can get up. It's a real bright red. It matches those jackets better than it's showing, but you can see I've got a bit of Inca gold and stuff again on the flowers, just so that they're not plain flat. I initially had thought, I knew I had some like Christmas berry type thing and I had intended to do clusters of those in there, but I can't find them. I wonder whether they got pensioned when we shifted on one of these international shifts. could be. Things go walk about from time to time. So I'm pretty pleased with how that's turned out. And next time we go back to the States, or the next time somebody comes to visit, I will send that back where it belongs, to my mom. And she will finally get this hanging in her living room, hopefully. Originally, I think she had it, there was 2 of them, and she'd intended to have the matching pair. If I have the other one, and if it's finished, I still haven't found it and identified it, so we will have to see where we end up. Kind of depends on what the color scheme of the other one is. This is, you know, with the bright red flowers, I don't know. That might clash with the next thing. I don't know. We'll have to see. So she stitched that 99, so obviously it's pretty old design. All of a sudden the light's gone wonky. There it goes wonky on the other way. The only thing I could find about that design, somebody on one of the cross-stitch Facebook groups found the name Tally Ho. And so I can see evidence that it was posted in a magazine, published in a magazine, and I can find evidence that it was maybe as part of a leaflet. My guess is Mom would have bought the leaflet. It would have all been stitched in DMC, but that's a guess. Excuse me. This one, let me get my board. This one is another of her pieces. Again, no idea on the origins really. Maybe a kit. I can see a bit of metallic in the horses. She did have some metallics in her stash and stuff, so maybe it was something she kitted on her own. But it was, yeah, it's dated 99 again. This one hasn't been finished yet because there's some staining down here in the corner. I was hoping to have a better go at fixing and trying to get that stain out. But I guess I'm planning at this stage to do something relatively similar in idea to the horses. Once I clean that up. And so in that case, I grabbed a bunch more of these plywood things, except these times I've painted, the base coat is in gray. Probably go for more of a shabby chic sort of theme, rather than the rough and nature theme for the other one. So we'll see how we go. But these ones you can see I haven't cut wonky edges. I've just left them straight and tidy. I just figured it seemed more appropriate to the piece. Eventually when I get organized, you know, all 6 pieces or however many I need will go in line with each other. And then you probably saw the other one, I had a board hidden behind that the magnet went on, and that also holds all these individual pieces together. So I was, you know, given it just sort of a let's see what we can make up style of approach. I thought it turned out quite well. And if you go to your, well, at least the Australian big box stores, and you try and buy the backing like this, A, the ones we're finding were much smaller, wouldn't have accommodated this large piece, and B, I mean, they're 25 or 30 bucks before just to buy the base. So I didn't buy anything except score a bit out of the shed, which was only going off anyway. So I like that. Hey guys, I'm just going to interrupt myself a minute. I totally forgot to show you what my daughter did for me. You may remember seeing the 2 pieces. This was one of them. I think I tended to hang it like this. And with glass, it's hard to tell. The 2 ghost kitten pieces. So, hold on. We went and took one of them apart. You can see. Actually, this was really interesting to get a look at how they had because these had been professionally framed years ago. Clearly I did not leave enough border for their liking, because they put just a cotton. And it's mounted on a hardboard of some description with some padding over the front, and stapled in. I've always kind of wondered how to attach these bits on the inside. You would have noticed with the one I did for my mom, I used masking tape, figuring that, you know, it's acres away from the edge. Yes, this is going to discolor, but, you know, acres away from the actual stitching, so it's not a problem. I expect my husband has one of these staple things. I don't know whether that's good or bad. There's no indication of discoloring or anything around them, so and certainly where it's done on like just this random cotton that they've sewed to my Ada, it wouldn't matter if it discolored anyway. Up here it is my Ada all the way to the edge, so top to bottom they were happy with how much they had, but left to right clearly not. Anyway, after much fretting, she went and painted on the mats for me. So some of you may remember this was a practice. We're kind of toying with the idea of her painting on the mats on the chatelaine. So this was a practice, and I think practice was exactly what we needed. Part of it, I'm sure, is just comfort level. She smudged up here in the leaves a little bit and hit the panic button, you know, oh, I've mucked it up, you know, so a lot of trying to reassure, you know, it's like these pieces were something I did when I was in high school. They hung in my bedroom for a while, but I wasn't that attached to them that the world was going to end because she smudged some leaves. Having said that, now that she's painted on them, on this one anyway, all of a sudden it's a lot more special than it was, because, you know, my fizz is painted on them. So I thought she did a really nice job. I think in hindsight, you can see this little rose, she's tried to copy these roses up here. This little rose, it's got a bit more definition than the ones up here. So I think it's just practice, you know, picking your colors and whatnot, and you know, she's done a great job, fabulous job for her first effort, and you know, I hope she enjoyed it and learned something new. And if she decides she's confident enough to sew on my, or paint on my chatelaine, what is with the light? You know, I'll be super stoked to have something that I've stitched plus my fizz is painted on. So I thought that was pretty good. Alright, I'll get back to what I was saying before. As far as my own stitching, that actually fell in a bit of a heap in the last week. I was doing that magical stitches, and for the first couple of weeks of February I kept up really pretty well. But with all the aftermath of everybody going back to work and stuff after the flooding, I have not been able to keep up again. So this is the peacock piece I was working on. Let me see if I can get a picture of what it's going to look like. That's what it's going to look like. So you can see this is the start of the tail, and this is the part of the wing, I suppose. This is the lower part of the wing, and then upper part of the I think that's how it goes. Yeah, and then there's this gap here is where some of the flowers start to go. So this, for anybody who's new, is stitched on a 32 count Belfast from Colors Cascade Fabric. It was the November color of the month. It's labeled Cherry Pie, Sweet Cherry Pie. So I thought that was perfect for the bright peacock colors. Oh, excuse me with the coughing, guys. I assume it's got to be something in the environment. About halfway through all the flooding, with the moisture in the air and no doubt mold. We had serious mold problems after the flooding. Something is just riled my throat. Like, I haven't had a cold or anything, but I just get this cough. And when I talk, I start coughing. So there's not really much of a way to do a floss tube without talking. Unless we could do the whole silent movie and make it black and white. Yeah, that wouldn't do any good. Half the fun of the stitching is all the pretty colors. Okay. So with the chatelaine, I have been continuing with that koi pond up the top. You can see I've got the first koi fish, and those stone lanterns had a name. Toro? Something like that. I forget. I'll have to look it up again. But I think, like, I've done all this mossy area is complete here. I got a little bit on this side to fill in, and then obviously this stone lantern. And at some point I'm going to have to quit avoiding that last fish 1/1. So that fish took me all of a Saturday morning, which is about 3 hours of stitching and gas bagging. So it's not the most efficient stitching for 3 hours, but yeah, it's tedious. 1/1 is not my favorite, but given the time and effort that you put into the detail and everything else in this piece, there's no way I was going to stitch it sort of a half 2/2, fudge it, just make it work sort of thing. It seems like such a waste to invest all the time and effort, materials, and the rest of it, and cheapskate it on a couple of koi. So I will suck it up, and I will have to do that koi and the other 6 around the other corners. But I'm kind of hoping to finish this stone lantern sooner rather than later. You can see where I've started to branch off into the trees and stuff over here. My original plan was to basically do all 4 lanterns in the intervening koi ponds and mossy areas. But inevitably, once I have something on my needle, you know, if I use up a color in the lantern and it is out in this tree over here, I'm not about to put it away and pull it out another day when I'm ready to do the tree. So I started branching out in the tree. Now I kind of wonder whether I should just continue around rather than do all 4 koi ponds and then all 4 corners. I don't know. We'll see. To be honest, the answer is probably when I finish this lantern, I'll make a spur of the moment decision and do whatever the heck I feel like. That tends to be how I stitch. On the upside, all the specialty threads, so there's a bunch of specialty stuff that's missing in here yet. All of that has finally arrived, so this is now fully supplied. I should have everything I need to finish it, which means I won't have to put it up while I wait for more things to come. Super pleased about. But it also means I've got to go back and fill in a few areas that I had skipped over because I didn't have things. Predominantly that border had a yellow silk lame braid that I just didn't have. So that is that. The only other thing I worked on was the Halloween tees. I'm wondering where my needle went. That's a bit of worry. So, it's getting too tall to fit in. So you can see I've gone and filled in the skeleton. I filled in a lot of the newt. And I'm working down predominantly on that ghost. And there'll be a witch over here. So I think I've got a little bit of back stitching on the new, and that's about it. I'll do all of the buttons at the very end. Yeah, so I'm making progress. This tends to be a piece I can travel with relatively easy, so this morning I took my son out for breakfast, and while we were waiting for, oh, there's my needle. It's always a relief. While we were waiting for croissants and whatnot, and I can stitch and talk to the kids and whatnot, and then put it away easy enough. So, excuse me. So that, like I said, with a relatively limited stitching period, with everybody getting back to work and whatnot, don't feel like I made a great deal of progress on any one thing, but at least I touched a few things, and didn't do too well on my magical stitches homework. We shall have to try and rectify that. But I did have plenty of time to go shopping. So, I do not have a picture. I'll have to insert one. I'll try and insert it here. I'm only going to do one panel to start with, the one with the park bench in it. I think I will start. So, 2 bobbin boxes full of threads. Should be enough to get me started. It won't do all 3 panels, but I'll augment as I need. It's at least part of a scheme of every color. There is just a generic, honestly, I just looked for the cheapest even weave. It's actually got a really nice modeling on it. Seems sort of a shame to do full coverage on it, but it was even weave. It was inexpensive, given the size of this piece. I just, like, I had to buy an entire meter of fabric with this count to do all 3 panels. I will frame each panel separately, which means I need extra allowance around each panel, which doesn't help your numbers. But yeah, basically I just looked for the smallest count and cheapest even weave, because full coverage is not much point in spending a fortune on something you're going to cover up anyway. So there was that, which is not super exciting, but it does mean I can start that Aura of Autumn now whenever I feel like it. As far as when, I don't know. Glad to have it all there kitted up, ready to go. I kind of thought about, well, since it reminds me of time with my husband and stuff, maybe I should start it on our anniversary, which is the end of April. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. There is that. Picked up from one of the stash unloads. See. Seem to be in a thing of collecting Santas at the moment. I think that's about the 3rd Santa I've picked up. Haven't started one of them. Have no intention of starting that anytime soon. It was just an opportunistic, ooh, pretty. This is another one of those, ooh, opportunistic pretty. Teresa Wensler's Christmas collection. So, again, back to this whole collecting Santas. I'm looking at this one up here. Santa with the horse. I think he would look really cool. That's probably the one I'd do first. I actually had the 4 carousel horses in a leaflet form at one stage. I don't know if I still have them or not. I've done one of them. I don't know which one I did, and it was years ago. I have no idea where the piece ended up. But she's got some cool ornaments and stuff in there. This is an angel in the red. The sampler. I probably won't. I just got to think about samplers and alphabets. They're not my thing. The wreath is pretty cool. So yeah, I don't know, just stash it for one day and maybe I'll decide I'm going to do one of those. Maybe not. I don't know. Oh, the last, sorry about that. The dreaded insufficient storage message. So, when it killed out, I was just about to tell you that I've gotten my first thread of the month from Journey of a Stitcher. It's an Australian-based Etsy store. I think Nicole is her name. It's interesting. I kind of expected that when you signed up for this, you basically get, like, she's doing Dinky Dyes and Gloriana's, you know, rather than dyeing her own. But I guess I still figured when you signed up for one of these, you get a random selection or color coordinated selection of Dinky Dyes or whatever you chose. Instead, what she's done, and it's just not what I expected. I don't know that it's good or bad or otherwise. It's just not what I expected. She's basically started at the front of the list and sent you the first 5. Next month, you get the next 5. So, being this is my first month, I get numbers 1 through 5, I think. Which happen to color coordinate, but I don't think that's necessarily always the case. Like I said, I'm not convinced this is, given I have so few Dinky Dyes, 5 is 5. So I don't know that there's anything wrong or otherwise. It's just kind of threw me for a loop when I got them and found it. That's all. So, first one I got was number 1, Raspberry Ripple, which is not hot pink like it's showing. It's a beautiful, deep flower rose sort of pink, but it's not hot pink. Number 2 is Purple Haze, which variegates from the purple to the pinks, and a bit of real light, almost white, but it's probably a bit pinky. Number 3 is Lavender Mist. It's just a very pale pink. Appears not much, a little bit of variegation, but because it's so pale, it's not overly visible. Number 4 is Strawberry Ice, which is even paler. Honestly, if you weren't looking for it because you had a whole bunch of pinks, you could be forgiven for mistaking it for just white, until you put it up against something that was white. Excuse me, I promise the coughing won't last forever. Although it might be a couple of videos. Excuse me. And the last one, number 5, is Mulberry Ice, which has a bit more of the purples rather than the pinks in it. It's more subtle than the purple you're seeing on screen, but again, it's the very light purple to very, very, very light purple variation. So, given that, I can guess I'll get 6 through 10 in the next lot. I could, in theory, go and Google and see what 6 through 10 are going to be. I don't know whether I want to do that or not. I kind of like having a surprise. But at least this way, you know you won't get duplicates in the first while. Which I think is why she does it. Just so she can keep up with, you know, who's had what and whatnot. So, as far as stitching supplies goes, I think that's everything I've bought in the last while. I did end up in our big box store looking at fabrics, because now that I've started a few extra things, I need a few extra bags. So, first one I found, and I mostly got this one just because my daughter loves Harry Potter, and if I make something with my Marauders matte fabric before she does, it'll just wind her up. I mean, I like Harry Potter too, but not quite the obsessive fan she is. So I got that one for the front of a bag, and I thought this would make a good inside of said bag. It matches better than the camera shows. The inside is a bit brighter. but it matches better than the camera shows. Anyway, so maybe I'll get to that project shortly, maybe I won't. We shall see. Then, because I'd already picked this one, and I realized that, oh, that one goes quite nice with it too. It picks up on that bud. So I will do the same. Just leaves, flowers. It's all upside down. Eiffel Towers. But I will do one out of that as well. I think these ones I will just make the standard sizing that I've worked out rather than the monster chatelaine bag that I made for some of the smaller projects. I don't really have a project that I'm desperate to put in there or any reason to hurry them up. I just figured a few extra bags floating around is a good thing. So I think that's about it for me. So I will catch you next time in a couple of weeks. And until then, happy stitching. Bye.